All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am Carlos Ramos. I head up global customer success over here at Rock Content. I've been with the organization for about 7.5 years. In my role today, I get to work with many of our awesome customers and all of their different digital content strategies. And if you're new to this first jam session with us, welcome. We're super excited to have you all here. Our content marketing jam sessions are a brand new mix of presentations, interviews, and webinars. They're hosted by us over here at Rock Content. We feature top marketing experts and innovators, while each session covers unique topics and features different voices. They all have one common theme, and that's providing you, our audience, with advice, trends, and best practices on how to master successful premium content experiences for your business. So we are going to be recording today's session, so you will have access to it following the event. We're going to go ahead and leave some time at the end to ask Joe some questions. So please, at any time, feel free to share your questions with us in the chat box. If you hear something that you like during the jam session, feel free to share it on social using the event hashtag jam session. So for today, we're really happy to welcome Joe Pulizzi. He is here for his second jam session with us. Last year, Joe joined our CMO Pisania for a chat about content marketing. I'm really happy that he agreed to come back and talk to us today about what he's up to now. I would say that Joe needs no introduction, but Joe, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to some of our attendees?
Carlos, thanks. It's good to be back for the second jam session. Yeah, I've been in the publishing industry for over 20 years now. I started with a traditional B2B publisher, moved on to this thing called content marketing in 2007, launched what became known as the Content Marketing Institute. We focused on education and training for mostly larger enterprise around the practice of content marketing, and had that company until 2007. Still very involved in Content Marketing Institute. Our big event was Content Marketing World, where we got 4,000 people every year to Cleveland, Ohio. And then my wife and I sold the business. I took a couple years off, wrote a mystery novel called The Will to Die, and now I'm back at it again. I rewrote my book Content Inc., which actually launched this today. Launched a new business called The Tilt, which is an e-newsletter for content creators. I've got a nonprofit called Orange Effect Foundation, speech therapy for kids, and whatever else, Carlos, we could keep going. But yeah, basically I'm dedicate all my work to content creators and how they can build sustainable businesses through the use of compelling content.
Yeah, and big congratulations on the release of that second edition of Content Inc. Big achievement there. I know the original book was released in 2015, and I think in a lot of ways really helped marketers change the way that they look at marketing, moving away from this concept of campaigns and moving more towards taking a look at content as a long-term investment, and or even looking at it as a currency that can build over time and actually drive long-term value for the organization. So when we're thinking about this new version of the book, what do you feel is the biggest takeaway?
I think that most organizations don't understand the muscle of content creation and content marketing in the business. They look at it as just another form of advertising, and they look at it very short term, and they usually leverage content pieces around campaigns. And you and I were talking before we came on air, is content marketing in itself is not a campaign. You can't say content marketing campaign. That's not a thing. You can use content assets in your campaign, but content marketing is about valuable, relevant, compelling content creation to a targeted audience over a long period of time in order to see some kind of behavioral change. That's content marketing. It means the long period of time is really the key thing that makes this work. I mean, when we look at, and we talked about this in the book, there's two reasons why businesses go wrong at content. First, they don't have a content tilt, and we talk about it. That's a differentiation area. What's your hook? What's your why? Why should people even care what you're talking about? And the second thing is consistency. You have to consistently deliver over time. You can't just say, "Oh, I got a YouTube series. We're going to publish twice this week and once next week, and then we're going to miss." Or we got a podcast or an email newsletter, and we're going to send it out on Friday, and then maybe not for a while. Or you have to do things consistently. You want customers to set an appointment with you, even though you've got all these social channels. And then the last thing is, we could talk about more of it if you want, but I'm really trying to talk to marketers today about getting rid of some of their channels and their content creation on particular channels. Because if you look at Content Marketing Institute research, the average marketer delivers content in 14 to 16 different channels. That means they're probably doing it mediocre at best. You have so much content in the energy in the organization, you can't spend time being great at everything. And if you look at how media companies became media companies, they did so by focusing on one content type, one platform, consistently delivering to one audience over time. It's not rocket science. I don't care. That's 300 years of media creation up to today. That's how it's done. But us marketers, and I'm a marketer, I can say this, we get in there, we see all these shiny objects, we want to deliver content everywhere, and then we realize that it's made no behavior change at all, and we're wasting our time and, more importantly, our customers' time, and there's a better way to do this thing.
Yeah, and talking to a lot of content marketers out there over the years, one of the big things that I've noticed is, people get into this mindset where it turns a little bit into a machine. You're just kind of pumping out the next thing because that's what you've been doing this entire time. And one of the really interesting things that I was seeing within the book is this idea of keeping things simple, but keeping them value focused on who you're trying to reach, right? So it's not about just putting out the next white paper to hit a KPI for putting out X amount of white papers. It's about really listening to your audience, understanding their needs, and then putting out content that's really relevant and engaging for that audience. It's been about 6 years since the original release of Content Inc.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Joe, what why do you feel it was the right time to update Content Inc. right now?
Well, I'll give you the short version of the story. I mean, I was writing mystery novels. I decided I took a full year sabbatical. I decided to start writing mysteries. I wrote The Will to Die. It did pretty well, won a couple of awards, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to be a mystery writer now, and that's kind of the second chapter of my career. And then the pandemic hit. And then a couple of weeks, we're all in lockdown. A couple of weeks later, I start getting texts and emails and messages from friends and colleagues and even some connections on LinkedIn. And they're trying to figure, say, Joe, I'm looking at the Content Inc. model. Joe, I lost my job. I'm in trouble. Joe, our business is really struggling. We're looking at content creation now. Joe, our budget is in shambles. We're trying to recreate our story. Like, is the Content Inc. model something we should look at? And I'm like, this is weird, Carlos. I'm like, this is like, what's going on here? This is my podcast, which I stopped creating at all, started to get more downloads, and it was dead for like 2 years. So I'm like, okay, something's going on here. I started to do more research, started to look. There's more focus on content creation than ever before inside an enterprise, individual content creators, the whole thing. And I'm like, okay, well, let's give it a shot. I called McGraw-Hill Education up, my executive editor there. I said, I think there's a thing. Can you look at the data? Is this happening? She's like, yeah, your sales are way up on this book. What's going on? Did you do a promotion? And I'm like, no. So we said, I think this is an opportunity. We said, okay, well, let's go ahead. So about exactly a year ago, we started doing the interviews, the case studies, started checking the model. Is the model right? Going through the whole thing. And then at the same time, I'm like, the book's not going to be enough because people need every day. They need to understand that there is a business model here, whether you already have a company or whether you're trying to grow a company. And 99% of the marketers and business owners I talk to just aren't doing it right. It's kind of content run amok. It's all over the place. They're trying to boil the ocean with content. They're not doing any positive behavior change. And to your point before, they're not serving anybody. They're trying to serve themselves. They're focusing on widgets and KPIs, and they're not saying, look, how can we help our audience live a better life and get a better job? And if we focus on that, then we will drive multiple types of revenue. So you have to build the audience first, and then you get the spoils after that. And that's the only way I know how to work it. So we checked the model. We adjusted the model. Model needs to change a little bit. We added a few more sections. It's a 7-step model now. We added another 50 or so in-depth brand new case studies. We added global case studies this year. So I'm just proud. It's a really good time for the book, I guess, because everyone was asking for it. But the other thing is it's a real need. I mean, there are more people creating content. There are more people create content not only in a marketing department, but with anything going on with like new job creation than anything going on right now. And it's all over the place. and people don't even know that there's a business model available that we actually have been following for a long time. And now we sort of try to put it in simple terms, and hopefully people will follow it before they go too far down the path. Because what happens is you'll get somebody that says, oh, let's do this content marketing thing. They do it for 6 months expecting results, which you're not going to get, by the way. It takes longer than 6 months. And then they give up. And that's what we have. We have a lot of disenchanted marketers out there that said content marketing doesn't work because they didn't understand it.
Sure. Yeah. And what's funny with the whole pandemic, I feel like, there was a lot of uncertainty happening, and obviously a lot of jobs were impacted, at that time. And there was a lot of uncertainty around hiring and expanding organizations. And kind of a side effect of it, I feel like it sparked a little bit of that entrepreneurial spirit. Yeah. And at its core, I feel like the Content Inc. model really is all about that. It's really about arming people that are looking to dive into some sort of an entrepreneurial venture, and giving them the right guidelines and steps to be able to succeed at that.
It's, we were talking about it. The model is really simple. It's not complex. We're not talking about complex analytical. We're not talking about marketing AI. We're not talking about anything like that. We're talking about, do you want to build a loyal audience? Is that good for your business in some way? And then if you do that, can you generate multiple forms of revenue from that business? That's the model. I mean, that's basically what media companies do, and media companies have been doing. And by the way, media companies are growing like crazy from an audience standpoint, but they don't understand the different revenue choices are available outside of what media companies normally offer. So what we're seeing, and we talk a lot about this in the book, where you've got companies like, I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. We've got a local hospital network called Cleveland Clinic. It's one of the world's largest hospital networks on the planet. Their content marketing division pays for itself in direct revenue, in sponsorships and content syndication deals and custom content deals. And that doesn't even count the fact that they're driving more patients into the hospitals. These are the things that happen that I don't think a lot of companies understand. That, when you look at Red Bull, they think, oh, Red Bull Media House, that's just an anomaly. Nobody can do that. No, everybody can do that. But people don't understand that Red Bull started as a magazine in 2006, 2007, and they delivered a really good print magazine, mind you. For a long time, they built an audience. It started at a racetrack. It was a Formula One magazine. And now Red Bull Magazine, Red Bulletin, has 2 million subscribers to it. And then if you look at all the stuff they do in video and entertainment deals and licensing, you have to ask yourself, is Red Bull Media House more or as valuable as Red Bull? And it's actually a significant question. You could ask that question. Red Bull Media House is really super valuable company in and of itself. And I think that most innovative companies can do that right now if they wanted to. You just have to think differently, that you're building an asset. Marketing is not an expense. Marketing is an asset, and you can leverage that asset multiple ways for a long, long, long period of time, and not just for a 3-month basis. So yeah, it's crazy. It's like the biggest opportunity for marketing that I think has ever been right now. But patience is a problem for marketing. It's a real problem.
I feel like the patience problem is real everywhere nowadays. We've got shorter attention spans. People are looking for the next quick big hit, especially with all the disruption that's happening all around us at any point in time within any given industry, really. Given how technology has really accelerated all of that.
It's so funny though, but we talk about that, and we talk about, we got to have more content, we got to have snackable content, bits and bytes and all whatever. But you know what? We'll sit down and we'll binge watch a Netflix series and spend 10 hours on it in 2 days. So we're engaging as human beings. We're engaging with longer form content than we ever had before, but we get infatuated with the story of the 20-second videos on TikTok. Yeah. So it's interesting to think, okay, well, what's really reality and what's really working? And I don't think we understand that.
Yeah. And for me, I feel like it comes down to the quality of the content. You could make good quality content for 20 seconds and get a good viewership there. Creating really high quality content that lasts 15 to 30 to 45 or 60 minutes, it's much harder. It's much harder to keep somebody's attention span that long. So you've got to have a really good message that's really well tailored to the audience that you're trying to speak to be able to hold their attention that long. I think is what it comes down to.
That's such a great point, but it's funny. Like when I was doing a lot of in-person, maybe I'll get back to doing in-person sessions pretty shortly. But I would always ask them, I'm like, okay, what's the average for a YouTuber? What's the average length of a video in general? Like what works for most YouTubers? And they'll say 2 minutes, 1 minute, 2 minutes 45. What's the average video? And I started going through these examples, and Matthew Patrick, who's one of the case studies in the book, he has a YouTube channel called The Game Theorist. His sweet spot is 12 to 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. So we think that YouTube is short form video content. It's not. It's longer form video content. That's actually where their sweet spot is, with the longer form. And I don't know where we got this whole thing where we've got a short attention span, because really we don't. If we look at our actions and what we're actually engaging in, if you look at e-newsletters, you look at blog posts, e-newsletters are getting longer and longer than they ever had before, 1,500 words to 2,000 words. Same with blog posts. We're seeing longer reports. We're seeing longer videos. We're seeing longer of everything, because I think people are starting to say, look, we want something, to your point, really quality. We want qualities. We got something that's going to make an impact. We want to see behavior change. We want to change lives with this thing. It's hard to do that in a 10, 15, 20-second video. To really change behavior, you have to do so consistently over a long period of time and really invest in your creation.
Yeah, and one not to digress too much, but one thing that I had in my head was, in 2020 you released that first novel, The Will to Die. What was it like to switch up? I mean, going from talking about content marketing, B2C, B2B, to switching to a full novel.
Well, I don't want to say, I mean, I've been writing marketing and business information for a long time. I don't want to say that it's easy, because it's not, but it comes easier to me than making up a story and a world and fictional cases. So I really, to be honest, I started writing at the end of 2018. I had a friend look at it in January, and he was honest with me, and he says, "This is terrible. Like, I don't know what you're doing here, but this is really bad stuff." Gave me some advice. I read Stephen King's On Writing, which, by the way, I would recommend for any writer, content creator, marketer. Read Stephen King's On Writing is fantastic. I started to learn about it. And then I also got some really good advice that said, this is not going to happen overnight. And this is really good for any content creator, but you have to create content every day and sort of work out the bugs. And I remember when I first started my blog in 2007, if I look back on those posts, I cringe. It takes a while to get into a rhythm. It's like I can't run a marathon tomorrow, but I could run a marathon in 6 months if I work toward it. It's the same thing when I started writing that fiction novel. It probably took me, I wrote every day in the morning probably took 2 weeks every day in the morning until I got into some kind of rhythm that was worth it. And then it really took about 4 weeks till I knew I had something and I could do it. And then it took about 4 months to write the book. So and I think that's what we forget, is we expect perfection right away with some of these things, but you have to get into running shape, and it took a while. So it took me a while to really, and that's the thing. If I ever go back and write another one, Carlos, I'm going to have to get into that shape again, because I stopped writing fiction for a while. Now I'm writing on the business side. So that's what I would say. I mean, you almost, if you're a content creator or marketer, you almost throw out the first 3 months, because you're just working out the details. You're just figuring out the audience. You're just opening up your listing posts so you can get feedback from this thing. You're getting some rhythm, working it out. Okay, what is it? What feels right? What doesn't? Especially with the thing like a podcast or a YouTube show. And then maybe you have something after 3 or 6 months.
So do you think you'd ever actually do it again, speaking of?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely do it again, but probably not while I'm launching a new business. I would like to, I mean, so the Tilt launched in April as just, a 2-time-a-week e-newsletter. We send it out on Tuesdays and Fridays, and that's all we are right now. So we're following the content model. We're building our base, and we've got just a few social channels. We would look at that. Twitter and Discord are our only 2 social channels we really worry about right now. And then we're going to build up that audience over time. And then once we get to 6 to 9 month mark, we'll start looking at, okay, what revenue direction do we want to go for? All we're doing is we're building what Brian Clark, a copy blogger, calls a minimum viable audience. You have to create a minimum viable audience to get the feedback on the content, and then also try to monetize that audience at the same time. So that's kind of where we're at. And then maybe maybe down the road, after that, if we get things running, I'll write another one. I do want to write a sequel to this book. And the reason why I like The Will to Die is it's the only book that I've ever read. I mean, I wrote it, but I've never read another book that has a marketing agency guy as the lead character. So
Something
I
that
mean,
a lot of people
we don't get enough. Yeah, us marketing agency people don't get enough love. So I figure, oh, let's do that.
All right. So speaking of the tilt, where do you see that business going in the next 5 years? I know it's really early on, but do you have any kind of long-term plans for it that you're really pushing towards?
I've got a long-term plan. We've got a visual business model that we work with and kind of see, okay, where are we starting? What's the core platform, which is email newsletters, and then where are we diversifying? So we've got some things coming together. We've got the This Old Marketing podcast and Content Inc. podcast as our diversification arms of the main platform, and then everything drives to the platform. We're really focused right now on creator coins, so and the reason why is I think that creator coins and social currency is really going to be a thing. I think it can be a thing on the corporate side. I think it'd be a thing on an individual side, but nobody has a really good use case. So we're trying to figure out the Tilt as a use case. So we partner with Rally. We have our own creator coin called Tilt Coin. You can go and buy it and trade it and all kinds of things. And we're trying to create enough value for that Tilt Coin where people will say, oh, this is really a thing. So if you subscribe to the Tilt newsletter, Carlos, and you have your referral code, you share it with somebody, you get $5 in Tilt Coin for everyone. And I feel like if we do that, we can actually build our own economy off of that. So we're testing out crazy things like that right now. Sure, yeah. Do I think down the road there could be, there obviously is going to be a training. We'll probably launch training on content creation in the fall, probably November, December. And then I don't know what's going to be down the road because our audience will tell us what the next step is going to be. And I remember that I had to learn my lesson when we launched Content Marketing Institute, and I just kept launching product after product that didn't work. And then finally I started to listen to our blog subscribers, what people were sending us on social media and our emails. And they were saying, Joe, is there in-person training available for content marketing? Joe, is there a content marketing event? By the way, this is back in 2009. So this is 12 years ago, but they kept asking for these things. And I said, well, why don't we just create the revenue streams that our customers are asking from us instead of trying to guess, which is the whole idea for Content Inc. It's don't guess about the revenue that you can generate from your loyal audience. Just listen to your loyal audience once you built it, and they will help drive millions of dollars for you. And that's all we did. So we launched, Content Marketing University training. We launched Content Marketing World, the event, which became a huge event, the largest in-person event in the industry. So just do that. And the challenge is, Carlos, again, it comes back to the patience thing. We had we had about 2 years of creating the blog consistently every day. We built that audience. That audience right now is up to 250,000 opt-in subscribers. That happened through just driving valuable information every day. And you and I can count on our fingers how many corporate enterprises have that kind of patience to do that. But that's why you almost have to treat it as, I don't want to say side project, but you have to say, look, you are going to give 20%, this group over here, some leeway. You're going to say, look, we're going to give you 18 months to figure this thing out, to focus on and build our audiences for us. And if you do that, you can become a Rebel Media House. So you can do what Arrow Electronics did, where they have, the largest audience of electronic distributors in the world, and they're not a media company. They've got 53 different brands or something like that. So these are things that you could do, but patience takes time, and you got to sell it internally. You got to sell the chief marketing officer on it, or you get fired in 6 months because they'll be like, hey, we didn't hit our KPIs yet. Hey, this is different. This takes time. They're like, I don't care how different it is. You're gone. So you have to set that up ahead of time.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that, like the piece where I'm listening to your audience, we do a lot of interactive assessments with our customers. And when I ask them, like, okay, what's your goal for this assessment? 99% of them will say lead generation. And in my head, and I communicate with this, and I try to show them the light, right? But for me, the most valuable piece isn't the leads. It's what people are answering in that assessment and what you do with that data moving forward.
Yep.
If you find that 75% of your audience is self-classifying into one segment on your results page, what are you as a marketer now able to do with that? You're able to create 5, 10 different content experiences just based off of that data. And, when you're thinking about content marketing, it's really tough to balance the short-term KPIs around I've got to hit X amount of leads this quarter versus the real long-term strategic thinking that drives true growth within an organization.
Oh, that's such a great point you made. It's funny, we're like, how are we, what are we going to do in content and social? How are we going to cut through the clutter? I got this question the other day, and I think they were expecting me to answer, launch a podcast or whatever. And I talked about, well, what if you were the research project for your industry? What if you created that? What if that was yours? And then you're talking about creating all these amazing experiences off that research, and you have the data. You have the data of all your customers and your audience and what they're doing and what their pain points are and everything. And you do that over, many, many years. You'll build the audience. You are the go-to place. I mean, it's funny because we didn't, I don't know if I thought about it that hard. I wanted to do that in 2008 when we launched the benchmark study for content marketing. Sure. I just felt that we needed to do that. We needed the information. Our audience needed the information. But I said, hey, this would be a good idea for us to do. Who knew that in 3 years that was going to be, we'd have, I don't know, it's something like 25,000 different websites point to that research.
Yeah.
Because it became the industry research. And I think if we could just think out a little bit and say, okay, ask yourself that question. How do you serve? How can you be the thought leader? You don't have to do it by distracting and saying, here we are. You have to do it by giving them a gift. And what is that gift? And that's why I love that idea. It's almost like I'm so old school because I talk about research projects and talk about, hey, what do you think about a print magazine? But those types of things, because those are the types of things that people are trying to get away from the smartphone sometimes. And you have an opportunity here with other medium to tell a story that nobody else is telling.
Right. I mean, it's funny because, for a while, everyone thought that, the physical mail was going to die off. Yeah. And there's certain parts of it that I really wish would die off. I get way too many like
direct mail and exactly.
Yeah. But what I found to be really effective when we're trying to get a hold of somebody within an organization is if you send a letter, you're going to get a way better response rate out of that than an email, because you're cutting above the clutter. Nobody's really doing that sort of stuff. I think other people have started to catch on, and we're seeing a little bit more. But if you can get really creative, you're able to cut through it. I keep a spinner on my desk. We used to send these little spinners to customers that were a little unresponsive, and it was basically like, hey, I've been trying to get a hold of you for a while, but we haven't been able to connect. I figured this spinner might be able to help improve my odds. Take a spin and let me know if today's the day.
That's pretty good.
Great response rate. Yeah,
that's so good. No, it's funny. It still happens today. I've got 2 older teenagers, and when Lego magazine comes in the mail, they fight over it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a magazine, but there's no competition. There literally is. How many quality? Think back to 10 years ago. How many quality print publications did you get? You usually got 1 or 2 or 3 a day. Yeah. Now, maybe you get 1 a month.
Right.
As far as I can tell, the Post is still delivering. What an opportunity that is to deliver that kind of impact and cut through the clutter. And just look at what innovative companies are doing. I mean, you got Sam's Club, Walmart, you got Amazon. They're doubling down in print right now. You've got somebody like a MailChimp buying a print magazine called The Courier. So these things are happening, but I think sometimes marketers forget that, this stuff still works and you can make an impact. So you're like, oh, how do I cut through all the clutter? Well, there's no competition over here. Yeah. Literally. Yeah. I mean, you could still do digital marketing, but did we forget everything? And that's why I'm like, okay, we still do events. We can still do print.
Sure. Yeah. It's just keeping your eyes open, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, in the book, we were talking a little bit about this before. There's a really great chapter about, diversifying your content strategy. And, one of the biggest challenges for our customers is that, finding the right resources and expertise for all these different types of formats can be a really big challenge. How do you suggest companies tackle this sort of stuff?
From an expertise standpoint, like find content. Well, I think the first thing you have to realize is that what do you want to do yourself? Like, what are you good at? Like, are you really good? Do you have, like, Indium has a core of engineers that understand industrial soldering equipment. That's what they sell. Now, do you think you want those 27 engineers to create that original content? Well, that was, I don't know if you've read any engineering white papers. They're very hard to understand. Engineers are not the greatest storytellers. So they had to make sure they hired the right editor and editorial team to make sure we bring that content to the public on a regular basis so they can make an impact. So it's like, okay, we have the knowledge, but we don't have the process behind it. So they said, okay, we've got to plug in the process. So I think you really have to figure out before you either hire a contractor, hire an agency, whatever you're doing, you have to figure out, okay, well, what do we want to do and what don't we want to do? And I would say that to an individual or to a large enterprise, because I'm like, okay, well, if you really like to write, maybe some of the raw content comes from you. If you have a voice for radio, maybe you want to do some of those things. If you don't like to be on video, don't be on, those types, or if you're good at this, what are you have to ask some of the questions that you have expertise and skill at. And then you have to realize, okay, where are our gaps in content creation? And then go out and find them. Of course, as you know, there's great agencies out there that can help you. There's great individual writers that can help you. So I would say generally when you look at the average company, you have a good portion, some portion of the content marketing process is outsourced. Mm-hmm. You don't see a lot that are doing all of it themselves. And the ones that you see doing all of it themselves usually don't produce on time because the regular everyday stuff happens in a business. You usually need and I'll call them a coach. You need a coach. You need some leaders that understand the process that can get the work out on time. I mean, I can't tell you how many, I grew up in the print magazine business. I can't tell you how many times we had to really focus the clients to make sure that we have to hit this date on a regular basis. Because if we don't deliver consistently, it's not worth doing at all. Because they'll be like, oh, we're going to push off the magazine to next quarter because of blah, 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 and budget and whatever. And I'll say, you're doing it wrong then. Mm-hmm. Like if you're creating content, that's a promise to your customers that you're going to deliver value on a regular basis. If you push them off for something, you've lost them. You've just lost trust. Just like if you didn't deliver a product, it's the same thing. Content is a product. If you don't deliver that content, then you've lost them. So that's why I like some outsourcing, whether that's the project management team, content creation team. Generally, project management is so critical, especially when you work with an outside agency. So I would make sure that they keep you on schedule so that you can keep doing your job and you focus on expertise and you have a team that can get the product out the door and focus on what it's doing and the impact it's making.
Yeah, and that makes a ton of sense. And with the increase in companies that they're kind of approaching their content more like a media business, and a lot of these companies that are going after that type of a model, you wouldn't traditionally think would be in that space. How do you feel about that? Do you think it's a good shift? Do you feel like maybe certain types of organizations shouldn't really be pursuing that? What are your thoughts on it?
I don't know if I'm the right person to ask, Carlos, but I look at all to me, the business model for New York Times and Cisco Systems is the same from my eyes, because both of them are media companies. They just monetize it differently. Cisco Systems wants to sell more routers. New York Times wants to sell more subscriptions and advertising. They're both trying to build audiences. They just monetize it differently. So every one of us, we're all publishers. We're all media companies. It just, at the end of the day, how do you perceive yourself to be and what do your customers perceive yourself to be? So it really doesn't matter. I just don't think people look at it that way. Do they look at Amazon as a media company? No, I don't think most people look at Amazon as a media company, but they're one of the largest media companies on the planet. So we talked about Red Bull, same thing. Arrow Electronics, they look at, oh, that's an electronics distributor company. I'm going to buy my chips from them or whatever the case is. You don't realize that at the same time, they are the largest media company in that industry. So I just think some people just aren't thinking about looking at the business model. So if you say, I have a loyal audience in the middle, I can monetize that audience through 6 direct ways that we think of media companies doing. That's advertising, in-person events, premium content, donations, affiliates, subscriptions, right? And then you've got your traditional, okay, there's 4 more that we would consider content marketing goals or KPIs. I could sell more products and more services, more loyal audiences, or create better yield from that audience, better customers. That's it.
Yeah.
Outside of some weird stuff going on, like we were talking about with creator coins, that's how you do it. So are you saying that, Amazon, the product company, is only going to sell products and services? No, they're going to do all the middle stuff in the middle as they do. So if you look at the most innovative companies on the planet, they generate 5, 6, 7, 8 different types of revenue from their loyal audience. Disney's a really good example. Who's Disney? What's Disney? Is Disney a media company, or is Disney a product company or a services company? Well, yes. The answer is yes. They're all of them. Yeah. And they have been for a long time. Walt Disney built that off of a lot of the things we take from the Content Inc. model, where they say, okay, we've got this theatrical film production. It's creating all these stories at the base. We're going to create an audience around that. We're going to do comic strips and television and everything else. And then we're going to drive all those people to Disney World, and we're going to make a ton of money. And they did. So they used that audience. They built this in-person event thing called Disney World. It worked really well. And then what happened? We know what happened in the pandemic, but good thing they diversified again into Disney Plus, and now they've recreated themselves again from exactly the same model. So again, you don't know. So long answer to your very short, kind question, Carlos. But I would say, I would ask people to really consider what kind of a company they are. Because if you say, we sell widgets, no, you don't. You serve what customer type? What you serve this audience. When you say you serve an audience versus you sell something, if you serve an audience, it opens up so many other opportunities for revenue generation. Right. I mean, and look at 3M. 3M every year, 50% of their revenues come from new products from the last 3 years. So they're continually selling new things to their customers. It's the same thing with this new model we're talking about. New old model. It's a very old model.
Right. And I think the key to that is, they're listening, right? They're able to continuously innovate because they're listening to the needs that their audience has. At the end of the day, you could have the best performing widget in the whole world, but if you're not able to effectively communicate the value and listen to your audience and the feedback that they have to continuously improve that widget, you're nowhere, right?
It's so crazy. I just thought about this because I brought up Amazon, but it's in the news that Amazon is considering buying MGM Studios, and you're seeing a lot of this fight for content. You've got Roku out there, you got Apple TV, you got all these people kind of vying for more content experiences. And you brought up experiences before, and people are. I think we think about it in traditional business models, but I think what you need to know is, why is this happening? Because people that engage in more of our content are better customers. Yeah. Generally across all businesses, people that engage in more content on Prime for Amazon are better customers than people that don't. So that's why, you're out there selling the same thing. It's the thing. So if we can get our customers engaged in more of our content, they will most likely buy. That's the hypothesis. They will buy more things. Then you do the research and figure out, oh yeah, they are. And we found the same thing. We found out that people that read Chief Content Officer magazine on a regular pace were more likely to go to Content Marketing World. Go figure, not rocket science. That's just the thing. So we're seeing this huge fight for this land grab of audience right now. And you're like, well, why is that happening? It's because content experiences are the most valuable experiences out there. And if a company can get you to engage in the ones that they're offering and they can build that audience, sky's the limit for the business model. Right
now. And, we're seeing like a lot of different types of content formats. And you talk a lot about that in the book. Which kind of feeds into the importance of having a diverse strategy. Which content formats do you feel are on the rise right now?
Well, I'm bullish on audio because podcasts, even though have been around for a long time, you still you're every year you're seeing more people are engaging in podcasts, and you still have a lot of run rate on to room to run. So I like that whole idea there. Of course I'm a big fan of video, but only from a consistency standpoint. And you need to really pick a platform that's going to be home to you. So are you going to create? So that's what we talk about in the book. It's like, okay, well, who's the target audience? What's your differentiation? What's your content tilt? What's that core platform you're targeting? And what's the content type? It is audio, video, textual plus image. So you can't go wrong if you do that and you say, okay, we're going to go on Instagram and do video. We're going to do on TikTok and do video. We're going to do podcasts with audio. So it's hard for me to say. You could literally do all of them. I mean, you're going to see in the next 3 years, in-person events are going to be huge. You're seeing right now, you're seeing this transform. Print is becoming what happened to vinyl. Print has bottom. You will see print come back up because you're seeing more companies like Amazon and Walmart get back into print. So I like all of them. I just think you have to have a strategic use for what you have. So figure out what that core platform is and then diversify properly once you built that audience. And generally you have that 1, 2, 3, 4 different ways you diversify for an audience. So you might have an email newsletter, you might have a podcast, you might have a YouTube series, you might have a Twitch channel. And those are your 4 channels that you just distribute to content every time. The last thing I'll end with, Carlos, is this is not a new thing, but at the end of the day, be careful if you're building your content house on rented land. I mean, you've got, if you build it, if you do a Facebook group, Instagram, you do TikTok, whatever, you don't control any of that. You don't control your subscribers, your fans, your followers. You don't control any of that. Those companies do. So you're building their platforms for them, which may work out for you. But make sure at the end of the day, you have some kind of a strategy to get that data out of there. And an email newsletter seems to be the way to go. If you look at most of the YouTubers out there, the really successful ones, they figured out a way to get into some kind of regular email exclusive offering, a VIP offering for their viewers. And that has worked really well, where they can give something on a regular basis through email. So you can at least get that one-on-one control connection.
Yeah, I know you talk a lot about that in the book too, around some of the dangers and the pitfalls around. I love that term, building your house on rented land. I think a lot of small businesses have seen that, even when they're thinking about selling in eBay or Amazon or any of the other big marketplaces. As soon as they switch up that search algorithm, all of a sudden your sales plummet overnight. So I think it's applicable in content, obviously, but in all different types of businesses throughout the world.
You got to remember, it all could be temporary. I mean, when we go in and I'll do a content audit, somebody will say, "Oh, we're doing great on YouTube. We've got 5,000 subscribers. This is great." I'm like, "Great. What are you doing? Let's learn from it. Let's get some feedback." I want to be really positive with the whole thing. But at the same time, I want them to know, look, if YouTube changes their algorithm tomorrow, you're in trouble.
Right.
Which, by the way, they do all the time. They change So does Google, as you're talking about. Everything changes all the time. You could have access today. I mean, more and more searches on Google are, search results 0, which means Google's giving them the answer, which I think 5 years down the road is going to be the thing. You're just going to go to Google. Google's going to give you the answer. It's not going to be your website there. We have to prepare for those kinds of things. So how do we prepare that? We have to build our own audience. We can't rely on these platforms. So you just have to be aware that this stuff is happening. Facebook wants to keep people on Facebook. Instagram, same thing, right? It's a Facebook company. So YouTube is Google. They're doing the same thing. Google, it's crazy. They're all vying for power over audiences. And you can let them have it, and you could die, or you could figure out a way that you can have some of that and build your own audience.
Yeah. And, kind of talking a little bit about that, right? There's a lot of businesses trying to hop on some of the newer platforms that are popping up, like TikTok and Clubhouse and some of the other ones out there. What are your thoughts on businesses trying to pursue that? And do you have any suggestions for how to use them in a way that makes sense for that business?
Nothing wrong with experiments and running. I mean, you would want to learn. I mean, I'll give you an example. We did our Content Inc. book launch on Clubhouse as an experiment. It's still going on. I'm glad we did it. but after I'm done, I'm probably done with Clubhouse.
Okay.
I don't think that long term that's going to be a solution for us. So I would say that if you're 100% of your strategy, content marketing strategy, if you have 10% experimental, and you say, we're going to try this little thing over here for feedback. We're going to try this little thing over here for feedback. As long as you're doing this as an experiment. And then, I mean, I was just on my friend Joseph Jaffe's show, and when he launched his program, he distributed it on YouTube and on Facebook and everywhere else he could find. And he got all the data and then said, oh, I think our show is best on YouTube Live. And now he's on YouTube. So those you got to figure that out sometimes. I mean, I'd like to say that you can read all these books and figure it out, but sometimes you have to do it yourself. So do the Google, 10 or 20% method where you're sort of experimenting with these things and allow yourself to fail. That's okay. Learn from it and then move on.
Yeah, fail quick, right?
Exactly.
Cool. So, as far as kind of next steps, is there anything that you're planning? Anything you want to share with the audience?
I think that all we're focused on right now is, I saw a research project the other day that talked about what do kids want to be when they grow up. And it was like the first time that kids didn't answer astronauts and they answered they want to be a YouTuber or a celebrity influencer. Now, there's part of that I really love, of course, the content creation part, but the other part scares me because of the fact that you have two things. First of all, you have people getting into this and they don't know there's a business model available. And the second thing is that you'll have a whole generation of people that get reliant on a certain platform. Like you got Twitch streamers that are relying on Twitch and YouTubers are relying on YouTube. And as a media professional and a marketer, that scares me. And that scares me about, if you've heard the term creator economy, everybody's talking about creator economy and all this stuff that's happening with not only the makers like you're on Etsy or eBay, but all these content creators as well and everything that's going on. But what seems to be pushed out more than anything else is, these platforms are going to help you drive revenue. Patreon's going to help you. Twitch is going to help you. Twitter's got a tipping tool. They're going to do everything's going to, all these platforms are going to help you. They're vying for it, and rightfully so, because they want the creators to be on their platform. But it scares me that everyone's going to get sucked in, and you're going to be. I don't want to be rude about this because I have no problem with Uber drivers, but it's almost like an Uber driver where you're working for somebody else and you're kind of taking jobs when you can. You're working as like a side hustle, and you're going to see all these people working into side hustles, and I don't want to see that. I want to see if you want to create content and you want to share your information and build an audience over time, there's a business model for that, that's what I'm focused on all day long now.
Yeah. And going down that path of attaching yourself to something like Twitch, like you mentioned earlier, I mean, it's incredibly risky. If Twitch decides tomorrow to no longer allow you to be on the platform or no longer promote your content, all of a sudden you're left there with nothing really, because that goes away very quickly. Any advice for marketers that want to learn a little bit more about creating different types of content experiences?
Yeah, I mean, the obviously the book's out today. I would check out Content Inc. That's what I would do. I mean, we have got a podcast, This Old Marketing, that's out every Thursday. My Content Inc. podcast is out every Monday. I mean, and then the Tilt newsletter on Tuesdays and Fridays. That's all we're really doing. But that's what I'm dedicating my life to is at this time. So, and I would also say to absolutely get to experiment with it. And the one thing I would say, we talked about enterprises, and this goes for any business. I see a lot of content marketing programs fail because they don't set up internal training programs first. And what I mean by that is, and we talked a little bit about, if the CMO doesn't get it, it'll get killed. You have to make sure, if your content marketing program gets cut and it fails in some way, it's probably your fault because you didn't educate the people with the purse strings in your organization that they needed, this is special consideration. Here's what we're trying to do. Here's what goes on. I mean, So you see the best content marketers out there and the best marketing people start to say, here, financial people, CMO, CEO, here's why we're doing this. Here's why building an audience is an asset over time. This is why it's not an expense. Here's what we can do long term. Here's the hypothesis. We need time to do this. It's not overnight. If you explain it to them, because if you don't, what will happen is when times get tight, they'll look and say, what's that podcast getting us in revenues?
Yeah.
How is this YouTube series driving new business for us? And you're going to be like, oh, we're just building audience. What do I do? I can't figure this thing out. So that's what I would do, is an internal training program at the same time. Send it out to your 7 to 10 key decision makers on a regular basis. I know it might seem like a risk, but it's not. It's absolutely what you need to do to keep the programs running, because most content marketing programs get killed because somebody doesn't understand. They will absolutely do it. I've seen it happen a million. I've seen content marketing plans go. They're up for 30 days and somebody kills it because some new person got hired or some financial person didn't understand it, and you're done.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal.
Yeah, I would equate that to companies trying out email and then, giving up on that strategy after the first failed email. You would have lost out on a gold mine there.
It's so crazy. I have the questions all the time, and they'll say, oh, my podcast, that we're not building the audience we wanted to, which I don't know what that means, but they say, oh, we're not building it. And what can you do to help, Joe? And I'll say, okay, well, who are you targeting? What are you trying to do? Tell me about your show, how long you've been doing it. And it's always the timing. It's always, well, we've been doing it for about 6 months. And I'm like, 6 months? See, I said, did you have expectations to hit 1 million downloads in 6 months? You know how long this thing takes? It takes between 12 and 18 months to see any kind of a feedback. And that's why, of course, we were talking about agencies before. It's so tough to be an agency today too, because you've got to say this stuff is taking time, and you're on a 9 to 12 month budgetary cycle that's for something that takes 12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
Very, very tough to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. So, I think you mentioned a few of the different channels, but any other channels you care to share where we could learn a little bit more and connect with you?
JoePulizzi.com. You can check me out there. And then I'm at Joe Pulizzi on Twitter. And I would just focus on, I've got a lot of other books out, right, that I've written for a long time, but don't buy any of those. Just I've updated Content Inc. Because I think that's the business model that I would like to move forward with. Absolutely. And then my friends at Content Marketing Institute still do a great job. So if you're an enterprise marketer, that information over there will help.
Absolutely. Big fan of that. I put it in all of my training materials for new employees that are coming into the organization.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, it's important that they're all well educated in the space, of course. All right, so let's take some questions from the audience. I've got a few popping up in the chat. If anyone has any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat. So we've got a question from Teresa. So she feels that relevant content is actually losing space for social media posts. What's the best way to be seen in the world of snackable content?
Teresa, don't. You don't have to go to the lowest common denominator. First of all, I cannot stand snackable content because it implies that nobody has patience and nobody will take the time to engage in quality content, which is not true if you look at the data. So I would say, all right, Teresa, who's the audience you're serving? What is the thing that they need that's going to help them with their job, live a better life, whatever the case is? Focus on that first. Don't focus on the channel. Don't focus on the type of story. Focus on what the story should be. So start out and really figure that thing out. That's what we talk about, that content tilt, that differentiation area. This could be what yours is. And then once you do that, then you can think about, okay, how are you going to tell that story? That could be a documentary. That could be a print magazine. It could be all kinds of things. Don't fight for the viral tweet or the viral TikTok thing. I'm staying away from that right now. I'm not putting my money on any of that. There's a lot of individual creators fighting over that space. It's very tough for a mid-sized brand to even get any kind of attention unless you consistently do it over a long period of time. So again, go back to the beginning. I don't know what the answer is for you, Teresa, but I would say Who is the specific audience, and get very specific with who you're trying to impact, and then figure out how you can change their lives for the better without the product you sell. If you can figure that out, you've got a story to tell, and then you can figure out the channel and how you should say that.
Love that. All right. So Liz has a question. She bought Content Think New Edition a little bit earlier. And in the chapter about social and other channels, you say that we should use social media as a showroom, not as a main platform. Could you talk a little bit more about the importance of that?
I would say, again, you got to be careful. You can use social media channels as a platform. You just have to be careful, again, because you don't own or control any of that space there. So that's why I like to revert back to something we have more control over, like email, like a membership site, like a print magazine, those types of things. That's fine. But if you don't want to do that, that's okay. You can still go back to. I would just be minimal. And we didn't talk about this, but all organizations, no matter what size, Liz, we all have only so much content energy. So if the average, according to CMI Marketing Process Research, the average company distributes content 14 to 16 different ways. That's probably about 10 ways too many, because we just become mediocre at all of it. You can't be great at any one thing. So let's say you have only so much energy and you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to do some social media. I'm going to do a really bad e-newsletter. I'm going to be an okay podcast. I'm going to be a little bit, a virtual event or webinar series, whatever the case is. And you're just like, so. You can't be great at one thing. So the thing is, just be great at one thing. And then when you're great at one thing, then build in a couple of those social channels to build some followers that can ultimately drive back. And look at a Joe Rogan podcast. For whatever you think of the guy, Joe Rogan's created one of the most well-known podcasts in the world. How did he do it? He created a podcast, then he diversified into a YouTube series, and he leverages Twitter and Instagram. It's so simple.
Yeah.
It's so simple. We're trying to figure out how we need to be on every platform. Again, whoever said that you have to be everywhere your customers are at online was full of it. By the way, I said that about 13 years ago. You don't have, when there were like 5 channels, you shouldn't do that. You should focus on where you can serve your customers the best and what makes the most sense for your business and for your audience. So that's what I would focus on.
Yeah. And, when you're spreading yourself so thin, it's hard to maintain that consistency, which you mentioned is the biggest key here, right?
When you do, you really don't understand. I mean, I'm sure people listening to this will get it and say, oh yeah, we've got 12 Twitter accounts and we're in 5 YouTube groups or 5 Facebook groups, and we've launched 2 YouTube channels, and we've got 10 LinkedIn groups that we're a part of, and all this. When you really look at all the stuff you're creating content for, you could get up to 60, 70, 80, 90 different places on the web that you're delivering content to. And then you realize, then you ask yourself, well, what's working? And it's scary, right? Because most of them, none of it's working. So you have to say, okay, well, what if we went from 70 places that were delivering just a mountain of meh, and we put it to 5 places where we're delivering unique and differentiated content experiences? Doesn't that, it's just a relief. It's just like, oh God, I don't have to do all these 70. I can actually be great and focus on being amazing. I mean, when Warren Buffett and Bill Gates finally met each other, Meg Greenfield, who was the editor of the Washington Post at the time, said they just met. Bill Gates is nervous as all get out. And she asked them, write down the most important word that has meant success to you in your lifetime. And they both wrote focus, both of them. And they're like, oh, and they became lifelong friends after that. So I think we've got to keep that in mind. Focus.
Yeah. I remember reading that in the Content Dick book, and brought a smile to my face.
Yeah, I love that story. Of course, it works for the book, but I love the story. Yeah,
it's great. Okay, Robert has a question. Robert, I had mentioned Clubhouse. Do we think that social media focus on audio is the future, or is it just a quick trend?
No, I think it's definitely part of the mix. There's no doubt about it, especially with virtual assistants. You got Google Home, everything that's happening there. Mm-hmm. There is voice, audio. It is the only form of communication that you can multitask as a consumer. I can listen to it on my commute. I can't watch a video unless we get self-driving cars and those types of things. So I think it's huge. I think there's a great opportunity. There's a whole core group of people out there that want that. So if your story makes the most sense for that, absolutely, I would look at that. And then voice search is going to be huge. I mean, it is going to be a thing. It is already a thing. And if that's important to you, you probably need to have somebody in your organization start experimenting with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've got a couple of friends that are focused in that and different organizations, and they're just seeing the demand for it.
Oh,
boom
so crazy.
right now. It's crazy.
Absolutely.
Love that. So I don't think we have any further questions. Again, the recording for the interview is going to be available to everybody. We're going to go ahead and share with all of the attendees that were here. All of the past interviews are available too within a single page that we built within Ion, our interactive content platform. It's at interactive.rockcontent.com/jam sessions. Joe, thank you so much for joining us today. The conversation was great. And definitely look forward to having you back at some time in the near future. Okay.
We'll do the 3-timer. Yeah, absolutely. Carlos, thanks for the time. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you. Take care.